Hi everyone, in this video I will be talking windsurfing footstraps. As you can see, I have a slight obsession with them. Actually, I developed a little bump on my foot due to the friction issue. It's a problem that's known by some of the freestyle folks where there's a lot of moves that are done in switch stance where the top of the foot is under more stress. That triggered me to research the footstraps in general. On the first part of the video, I will be reviewing the footstraps one by one, and then I will go over the different settings and adjustments that we can do with the footstrap. The first footstrap that we have here is the Dakine Contour. It's a strap that's very soft. It has a rubber inner strap which is very flexible, so it easily just moves back and forth like this. Even when the footstrap is adjusted pretty tight on the sides, it still has a little bit of stretch to it. For example, on jump landing, the foot can slide a little bit. The footstrap gives and the foot can slide and jam a little bit in there, and makes it difficult to pull out. On the other hand, we get more comfort from the stretch at the cost of some control over the board. The next footstrap that we're going to look at is from Starboard. It was on the pure acid wave board. It's the lightest of all the footstraps that we're looking at today. This footstrap has a inner strap which is quite thin. The plastic that's sandwiched as a reinforcement on this model has worn out, so it's quite soft. It can flex and bend very easily. And that's a problem when we want to release fast, is a footstrap that's a little too soft is that it will tend to grab the foot. Right here is the section where the inner plastic is cracked in several spots. The outer layer is a very thin neoprene. It's the same as the Dakine Contour that we just saw earlier. It's very soft on the skin, but does tend to wear faster because it's so thin. So right here on the edges where the foot comes in and out and rubs the most, in one season it can start showing some wear. The footstrap right now, with being worn in and all, it feels quite comfortable when it's a little bit tighter, and maybe more dangerous when it's left wide open for a more wave application, which is a little contradictory given the fact that it came from a waveboard. The next footstrap that we have here is the replacement from the footstraps we just saw. It's by Drake. It's a little wider than the previous footstrap, and it's designed quite a bit differently. As opposed to have more sliding inner strap, it's all Velcro. It's very similar to the Dakine Primo design, except that it's quite a bit thinner. That inner strap is the inner plastic is much softer. It's just a little bit thinner than the Primo, and it offers more flex side to side, and it becomes quite soft with use. I was not very, I didn't have a very safe feeling in this footstrap, as it was just too soft for me, and would grab my foot when rotating sideways. The nice thing about this design is it has a little scale in the back to adjust. In the winter, when you have booties and you want to open the strap about 1 or 2 centimeters, you can easily do that. On the water, what I do is I usually just put my thumb right here, and depending on where I want to adjust it, I open it, and leaving my thumb in place, and just put it back about 1 or 2 centimeters from my thumb. I find it rather easy to do even on the water when there is swell. One tip that's important to me is when, especially on this design of the Velcro, is when adjusting it to have, and when new, to have my foot already in the strap before I strap it back up together, so that it keeps the shape and is not stretched or bent in an odd way. Once the footstrap has broken in, it's not as important. The outside cover for the strap is actually quite comfortable. It's pretty soft, and a little bit thicker. It's definitely thicker than the previous Footstrap. It has this thin neoprene layer, just like the other Footstraps we just saw, which makes it quite soft. But the foam underneath, you can feel here some deterioration of the foam, and actually can cause, with the salt water especially, can cause some blisters on the side of the feet. One way to remember the orientation of the inner strap is to have the Velcro on the outside. Most Footstraps are set up like this. So when we put it back in, we can see that the Velcro of the outer cover complements the inner strap and then just closes over like this. And I'll get back to this on the preference settings section later to see how we can trick and have a more comfortable Footstrap, not necessarily respecting that orientation. Okay, now we're gonna go over the two generations of Fanatic Footstrap, most recent being on the right. They both appear very similar in construction, but are slightly different. The one on the right, the newer one, has a softer outer cover, just feels better, and slightly longer as well, while the one on the left feels a little bit drier. So my vote goes to the newer model in terms of comfort. The inner strap folds in a more square shape than any of the other ones we saw. It has the same inner plastic strap, but it's beveled on the sides, and I find that it does help to remove some of that sharp feel that we could get on this edge. For example, when going switch stance with lots of pressure on the top of the foot. This Footstrap does feel a little bit softer than the older model. It has a bigger inner webbing on the strap than the older version. I'm not sure how it translates in terms of rigidity or flex, but that's just an observation. And there's actually a way to make a Footstrap more rigid that we'll see later in the settings part of the video. Right here you can see that the Footstrap is not fully adjusted on my foot, but it does feel quite comfortable. I like that square shape that it has. It could use a little more padding, a little softer. We can feel here a little bit the inner strap through the neoprene. This next one is a Footstrap by Neilpryde. I'm not quite sure what board it came from, but it's a very simple design with a sliding strap, which is fully stitched, fully padded, and it's very round. It doesn't have any of the sharp edges that some of the other Footstraps. It's a very simple design. However, it does grab my foot, maybe not in the right places. It tends not to follow the shape, an individual shape of the foot, so it's a little difficult to adjust and difficult to get good control over the board. Probably better to use in a tighter setting. So now we're gonna go over the Maui Fin company Footstrap. It's quite similar to the Starboard Footstrap earlier. The padding is a little bit nicer on it. It's a little softer. The design is with the Velcro on top and the sliding inner strap with a reinforced by plastic strap inside. This one has a little sharper edge on the side, which can be felt, especially when the neoprene dries out after several uses. So it's not as comfortable. Well, it has more padding, but is not as comfortable in terms of following the shape of the foot, not as ergonomic. It's maybe a little bit nicer when tighter. So what happened is, in the later model, they actually tried to address that issue and made the edge of the plastic inner strap beveled, like in the previous Fanatic model that we saw. The problem is that it's much harder, so that strap has no give. I mean, it keeps its arch and it doesn't flex. It's the stiffest one that there is. The shell, that hard plastic inner strap just doesn't move. You can tighten on the side, and here it has very little give. So what happened is, as opposed to help, it really actually hurt, because there was no give. The top of the foot strap remains flat, and it also does not really hold and has a tendency to slide in and trap the foot, because there's no velcro on either side to prevent it from collapsing. So it will stretch when lifting up on the foot, like at the bottom turn. What happens is that the foot just keeps getting jammed in there. Definitely not as safe. Next we have the JP foot strap, and she's a little bit heavier because the foam is denser. It's more like a gel, like the Dakine Proform. Also has that beveled edge. And the nice thing about the gel is it does hide all the imperfections of those little sharp edges and stitches and corners of the inner foot strap, so you can't really feel it when your foot is in there. So the nice thing about the gel is it also keeps its shape, and it doesn't dry out and thins out or gets harder on the edges. It really stays soft for a while. I like this foot strap because it has that square shape, same as the Fanatic. The inner plastic is a little bit thicker, a little bit wider, and so it doesn't twist as much as the Fanatic. So it has a little bit less give and better response, and improving foot steering precision. In terms of width, it's a little bit narrower than the Dakine Primo, which is quite wide. So it allows to move the foot a little bit in and out, or slightly sideways, to have a better fine-tuning over the board trim. And also the extra stiffness helps with preventing the foot from being twisted and jammed in the foot strap during violent crashes, so it has a better release. The last foot strap we're going to look at today is the Dakine Primo. It's basically very similar to the design of the Drake we saw earlier, except beefier. That inner plastic strap is much thicker and stiffer, so it has very little give forward. It is the stiffest foot strap of all of the ones that we looked at today. It's the widest as well. This edge here is not beveled like on some of the earlier ones, so it's can be quite sharp. And we can see it dents the neoprene a little bit. It also has like a sharp connection between the two substrap, and we can feel that through the neoprene. Yeah, it did make my foot feel a little sore after using it, especially when it was brand new. I don't know if it helps when it's broken in, but it has great support. This is one of the better holding foot strap. You can have it tight or wide, and it follows the outline of your foot quite well. So what I like from one and dislike from another, I came up with this combination where I used the inner foot strap of the JP and the outer cover from the Dakine Primo. So I get what I like from the inner foot strap from JP, which is the square shape, the beveled edges. It's stiff, but not as stiff as the Primo, which is a little bit softer, more comfortable on my foot. And then the outer cover of the Primo being a little bit wider allows me to add a little piece of inner tube, and this is fantastic because what happens is it hides all of the sharp stitches, corners, whatever that are in that inner foot strap, and it absolutely removes that completely from being able to feel it inside. It doesn't hold water, it's very light, and it's magical. This is now the first thing I do on most of my foot straps. And finally, what I like to do is reuse a piece of padding from an old foot strap, and that helps with making the inner foot strap quite soft and prevents the foot from getting sore in any way. It's important to cut out the little pieces where the screws go through because it can twist. This is a little thicker piece, and this is the gel piece from JP, which I like the best because it holds its shape and it doesn't dry out like neoprene does. Now it's important not to have too much padding, because we lose as we transfer our weight or we move our foot in and out of the foot strap, we lose connection with the board. So we want something that's soft, that removes the sharp edges or anything like that, but that still maintains control over the board. That's the most important part. So while a dried out thin foot strap might hurt your foot because it doesn't follow the outline of your foot well, a foot strap that's too soft or too open will make you lose control and possibly get your foot stuck in there. So it's up to each of us to find the happy medium. So now what I like here is that when I lean forward, I have a foot strap that follows me, but that when I release, when I put my foot back down, it still releases. It doesn't follow and hold my foot, which is still easy to slide out. Also, it has a nice tight connection on the side, not too tight. We don't want it to get stuck in there. But I mean, this is the nice combination between control and comfort. The nice thing is the Dakine Primo has a little bit wider design, so with the little bit thinner JP inner strap, it makes for a good combination when we add padding and everything. It's important also sometimes that very edge right here can hurt our feet, because this is where we have the most in and out friction, and so sometimes I add a little piece of neoprene to protect this corner. Alright, now I wanted to go over the different variations that we could find for the same manufacturers but on different boards. Here we have a Goya Freeride with a 15 centimeter spacing between footstrap inserts. So here, same board, but we have 15.4. On a different board, it can go down to 14.6. I think this is for finer tuning, but the width at the front was 15. So now we're going to look at the different foot straps, but mounted on that same 15 centimeter opening, and see what kind of inner width they show. From the narrower to the wider, here we have a Neilpryde foot strap at 9.7 centimeter, followed by JP 9.8, so quite narrow. Then we have the Fanatic at nearly 11 centimeters, as well as the Dakine Primo that's slightly over 11 centimeters. What we can do to adjust and fine-tune the width of the foot straps, or the spacing of the foot straps, is use asymmetrical washers like are shown here, and depending on which type, we can adjust more or less. The one thing to know is that if we use the washer, which will make the inner opening of the foot straps narrower, it will make it more rigid because it brings down the foot straps more. Now you can also skip holes or get one hole closer, but this will affect the angle on the front foot strap, which makes it more closed up, while it doesn't affect anything obviously on the rear one. So these are the two options that we can do to fine tune the opening. So for me, the Fanatic foot straps being a little more flexible, I like to use the washers, which will make it narrower to pinch it down and increase the rigidity. On the flip side, this Neilpryde foot strap, which is quite rigid and narrow to start with, wouldn't benefit for using washers. I mentioned earlier that there was an orientation of the foot strap. This is where the foot would go right in here with the Velcro sitting on the outside. So we'll have the toes pointing out and the heel towards us. Another thing is that straps are not symmetrical. There's one part of the strap that goes under and the other part that goes over. And this is nice because actually our feet are not symmetrical either. Now let's say that this is the rear foot strap with the rear of the board on our right. We'll have our right foot in with the inside of the foot on the left in the red zone, and the right side of the foot, the outside of the foot on the right in the green zone, and it would be the same for the left foot on the other side. Now on the left part that's marked here with an X, it's a little bit narrower, and what happens is on the inside of the foot it holds better, and we have better control, and it's not as loose as the other side. So for the front foot, I like to have the part that's red on the front. This is because that's where the weight transfers onto, and it holds and maintains the foot better. For the rear, I like to have the red zone also forward, because the foot is sitting at 45-degree angle a lot of times, and it will wrap my foot better on the side to give me more control over the board trim, and the ability to get the board to lift for speed and acceleration. And finally, having that looser, more open part in the back allows for quicker exit in case of a catapult. Alright, this concludes my video. I hope this may have answered some of the questions that you had on the Footstraps. Thanks for watching. Feel free to add a comment to the video or ask any questions that you may have. And also check out my anti-twist video if you haven't seen it yet.